Can hear me. So yes, I'm Olivia. I'm a PhD student at UNSW and hoping to submit my thesis in February, so it's coming soon. So yeah, this very long title is the title of my thesis. Again, a discourse-analytic approach to study of information disorders. Yes, so my research background is actually in discourse analysis and systemic functional linguistics. This is my first time attending ALTA. SFL studies meaning-making resources in language according to their social context. And it permits a systematic and detailed approach to studying language patterns via system networks. So I've provided an example on this slide. So there's a series of choices. Simultaneous curly brackets means that simultaneous choices can be made, or a square bracket means that only one choice can be selected. And I think systemic functional linguistics has a lot of applications for natural language processing. So that's what I kind of want to explain today with my research. So an SFL approach to mis and disinformation. So my research identifies the range of textual personae. By that, I mean the linguistically enacted identities who respond to mis or disinformation, or what I term information disorder, presented in YouTube video comments sections. And by considering personae in terms of the tendency to negotiate particular values, we can understand the main social bonds that are at stake in misinformation and hate speech. And uncovering these bonds is the first step in developing methods to renovate and overcome these negative discourses, since studies have shown that they cannot be overcome through logical argument alone. So in my research, I'm very interested in the interpersonal and how that's linguistically enacted. So to summarize the aims of my project, it's to understand the key affiliation and legitimation strategies used in the language and visual communication of YouTubers sharing information disorders. And then second, to identify and analyze the key social bonds that personae share or contest in comments when they respond to YouTube videos spreading mis and disinformation. And then thirdly, to compare and contrast politically motivated misinformation in terms of conspiratorial and white supremacist discourse to non-politically motivated mis and disinformation in the form of internet hoaxes. So the foundational framework of my research is appraisal, which explores evaluative meanings in language. I won't go through every subsystem, but the three main ones are affect, which is in relation to feelings and reactions to behavior; judgment, which is ethically assessing a person or behavior; and appreciation, which is valuing an object or phenomenon. And the ideation attitude coupling is the main analytical unit used in regards to the appraisal system. And this term coupling refers to the combination of ideational meaning, so that is what is being evaluated, and attitudinal meaning, so how it is being evaluated, so that's the options available in the appraisal system. And then these couplings create the basis of social bonds, as in the title of my thesis. And then the affiliation framework explores these bonds in greater detail. So to provide an overview of affiliation, I'm particularly looking at communing affiliation, which explores how social alignment occurs in environments where users are not engaging with each other directly. So these main systems are convoking, which is mustering together a community through vocatives or by naming that community. Then finesse, which is broadening or confining a bond. So are there many options, as in embellishing, or just one option, as in distill? And then tempering, which is upscaling or downscaling a bond, or emphasizing a bond. And then the legitimation framework is the final framework I'm applying, which refers to how discourses establish authority and can be realized by specific linguistic resources and configurations of linguistic resources. So these four main systems are authorization, so that's legitimation according to custom, authority or commendation, moral evaluation, which is the legitimation of value systems via evaluation, abstraction, or comparison. Rationalization, which is legitimation via theoretical legitimation, so how knowledge is constructed, or instrumental legitimation, so focusing on an institutionalized social action via the means or goals or effects of that action. And then mythopoesis, which is conveyed through narratives and future projections. So for example, via moral tales, cautionary tales, single determinations, so representing a story in a straightforward way, or overdeterminations, representing stories via inversion or symbolization. So the two case studies I focused on in my thesis was the Momo challenge. So that's representing the non-politically motivated misinformation. So it was an internet hoax about a threatening figure contacting children on WhatsApp. And there were several versions of the hoax, another one suggesting Momo challenge footage was being spliced into YouTube kids videos. And then the politically motivated misinformation case study was the Notre Dame Cathedral fire. So this occurred in Paris on the 15th of April, 2019, and was one of the most Googled news events of 2019. And during the news coverage of this event, a lot of conspiracies and white supremacist discourse was shared. And my annotations consisted of 750 main YouTube comments for each case study, and along with annotating all the replies to these main comments as well. So just to explain a little bit more of textual personae, which is a big concept in my research, this refers to how persons and personalities commune in discourse. And the linguist Durf introduced this idea of bundles of personae. So that is how personalities are manifest through and interact in discourse, incorporating a range of dimensions and tendencies depending on the functional context of their communication. And Durf's conceptualization is useful as it offers my research a way of understanding the identities negotiated in YouTube comments without reducing these patterns to particular individuals or their traits. So this table summarizes the main textual personae I discovered in the Momo challenge. So the connoisseurs, nationalists, and skeptics were sharing the truthful information about the Momo challenge, so calling it out as fake, whereas the critics, myth spreaders, and moralizers were spreading the false information and trying to spread this moral panic about the Momo challenge. So there are key linguistic patterns that are particular for each of these personae in terms of their affiliation strategies, and also particular patterns in their attitude and the, importantly, the target of that attitude, so who it is directed towards. And then this is my bond cluster diagram that summarizes the key social bonds, so like kind of the key social values that are unique to particular personae, but also social bonds that are shared with multiple personae. So for example, the myth spreaders and moralizers within the real Momo and dangerous Momo zone shared these bonds such as bad parents, bad YouTube, bad hackers. And then the nationalists, connoisseurs, and skeptics, on the other hand, operated within this safe Momo and fake Momo zone and shared superior nation and superior knowledge bonds. And then the critics were kind of an outlier here within the dangerous Momo, but also fake Momo zone, and shared good young people, bad media, and bad schools bonds. And then these are the personae I discovered in the Notre Dame fire case study. So the anti-elitist, anti-media, white supremacist inciter, sharing the false information about the fire. So either blaming like authorities or politicians or targeting particular religions. And then the skeptics, educators, and confrontationists were sharing the truthful information about the fire. So either like debunking the false information or expressing uncertainty about the veracity of the videos. And again, these personae are characterized by particular linguistic patterns in terms of their ideational targets. So what was being evaluated and how it was being evaluated. So particular negative ideation and attitude, or also, again, particular affiliation strategies or number of bonds as well. So, for example, educators were sharing multiple social bonds and also had more positive judgment compared to the other personae. And this bond cluster diagram, again, is summarizing these key social bonds for each personae and how they at times overlap as well. So the first group consists of the anti-elitist, anti-media, white supremacist, and inciter personae. So this group represents the, again, personae sharing the false information. And I should mention as well, the bonds that are in bold, again, are the social bonds that were more prevalent. And then in the second group, we have the skeptics, confrontationists, and educators. So again, this is representing personae that are sharing neutral or truthful information about the Notre Dame fire. And what's interesting about this diagram compared to the previous one I showed you about the Momo challenge is very polarized. So the skeptics, so the personae that were sharing the false information don't have any shared bonds with the personae sharing the truthful information about the Notre Dame fire. And I don't have time to go into detail with every personae, but just to give you an example of how I annotate the comments, you can see here on this slide. So for example, with the anti-elitists, they were focused on negatively evaluating authorities and politicians. So the ideation attitude coupling, as you can see that I've annotated, has a lot of negative evaluation. And yeah, experts were also delegitimated by being framed as liars by the anti-elitist personae. And then distilling affiliation was used to definitively state that the fire was deliberate. And then this is an example of a personae that was sharing truthful information. So the educator, which focused on explaining why the content of the YouTube video is false with positive evaluations here of multiculturalism and Muslims. And personal stories would be legitimated by commenters as well as expert opinions. And multiple bonds and affiliation strategies are used here in order to strengthen the claims. So with my research, after identifying the textual personae in both these case studies, the Momo Challenge and Notre Dame fire, I also worked on, I guess, generalizing this even more and developing these macro categories. So what I could derive from looking at both these case studies, the patterns in the personae I identified. So I developed these categories. So for example, in these comments sections, there was always some sort of skepticism. So someone questioning the veracity of the YouTube video, or instances of like criticism, criticizing the veracity of the video or an individual, or someone always providing education and expertise, or nationalism was less common, but there would be an emphasis on geographic location or nationality. And then there were always instances of like hate speech, so the negative judgment towards a person or group. And then storytelling and conspiracy. So that is personae that was spreading false information in a narrative format as a story. So just to provide one example of these macro categories with skepticism. So this skeptic personae was identified in both case studies with similar linguistic strategies. So that was embellishing affiliation and invoked negative evaluations. So I found it interesting, whilst the skeptic personae expresses an open-minded stance with the embellishing affiliation, a closer analysis revealed these invoked negative evaluations. And this personae was, I've used it as an example here because it was one of the most consistent across the political and non-political discourse examples. So for example, here with the Momo challenge, someone says, I'd love to investigate this. Does anyone know where they can find Momo's number? Have they all been taken down? So there is the invoke the negative evaluation that the Momo challenge isn't real. And then, and then with the example from the Notre Dame Cathedral case study, again, someone expressing this skepticism, I'm not sure what I'm seeing to make a clear judgment, but this has an invoked negative valuation that the video is unclear. So applications. So by being able to linguistically identify different textual personae in discourse, this means that tailored solutions can be developed for specific communities rather than overgeneralizing misinformation discourses. And as a Bond cluster diagram can show, false information can be engaged with in a variety of different ways. And so it's important to delve further into these reasons by exploring evaluative meanings in detail. And that understanding the personae in comment sections can aid in the creation of both manual and automated detection processes for identifying the specific networks of values that charge misinformation discourses. And yes, I'm done now. Thank you. Yeah.
Round of applause for Olivia, please. I'm going to now quiz the people on Zoom because I think we got good participation. So any questions from the folks on Zoom? Please unmute yourself. Yep. Or you can actually type it. Sorry, I'm just going to ask someone from the Zoom first, via Zoom. Yeah. Hopefully they have a question. Otherwise, before I go to the floor. All right, we'll give some time for people on Zoom first. I got two. Yep.
So thank you for the really interesting talk. It was really cool challenge you're tackling here. I have a very technologist kind of question, which is, those diagrams you presented were fascinating to look at, and I'd love to see them for other communities and other settings and so on. Do you think it's feasible to build a system to automatically generate them, or is there simply too much of your intuition and your sort of thought process to build them up? And obviously, this is not an easy thing. I'm just asking you, is there a world which is possible with the right AI and whatever models? Or what would be the challenges to achieving that?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Yeah, I think about that a lot as well, because I am obviously though working very manually. So yeah, I think certain parts can be like, there's already a lot of research I think into automating the appraisal, for example. So the attitude and yeah, maybe the ideational targets. Yeah, I guess it is getting a bit trickier when I'm trying to look at the affiliation strategies, I think, to automate that. And yeah, also just how I have kind of labeled some of the personae categories as well, I think difficult probably to automate. So I guess in short, certain aspects might be able to, but yeah, it's still work in progress, I guess. Yeah. Yeah.
So this comment, organize a shared task. So seeing the pressure can work.
Yeah.
Automatically they will do that.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Yeah. So I organize a task and automatically leveling the appraisal frameworks. I'm more subtle of that. And well, it was quite difficult. That was the outcome. Yeah. So I understand that it wouldn't be that easy to do the automatic classification. That's my comment.
Thanks.
Hello, very nice. Very interesting as well. And I understand how painstaking that sort of analysis is for SFL. And I guess my question was answered in terms of scalability. It's a hello.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand in terms of scalability, it might be a tougher ask, but two questions, I guess. Like, do you think that, because I found in my own study of SFL that my own analysis was subject to some degree of bias. Do you think that that could be mitigated if you were to introduce multiple perspectives of the same topic? Say you had multiple people performing an analysis of the same, the Momo and the Notre Dame as yourself. Do you think you would be able to find some sort of common ground and still be able to identify these macro roles or even the more specific ones as well?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I would love it if I had the more resources to have multiple annotators. But yeah, it's difficult. But in terms of like whether the results would be similar. Again, I mean, I think that's why I was also trying to work on these macro categories, because I think in some instances, you will always be able to discover the like negative evaluation, but I think it's going like, further into the subsystems where it gets harder. So at like maybe one level of delicacy in the system network, it might be achievable, but then it gets harder the kind of more detailed you want to, like, what I mean is, again, maybe identifying something as positive or negative, but then like going further into like what type of negative evaluation it is, it can be more difficult.
Thank you. Yeah, it looked very promising, and I guess just as a final aside, did you make any considerations at all in kind of removing your own bias on the analysis?
It's tricky. Also because SFL is very into like everything is part of the social context. Like we can't really remove ourselves from that. So I mean, I guess I've tried to go as according to those definitions in the subsystems. But again, it is a manual analysis, so I can't say it's always 100% objective.
It was very cool though. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Olivia. Thanks, Ames.